So I've made my week's videos, but it's a Saturday and I thought I would talk about something that's been on my mind and it's super relevant. We're going to be talking about Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary for the mayor of New York. And the reaction to that has been absolutely unhinged. You get shit like this from Representative Andy Oogles. Bye bye, little Mohammed. If you lied on your N400 naturalization forms, you're going home. And makes AI slop using Grok or ChatGPT, showing Zoran with books about communism, I guess. Obviously, the backlash to him has been gross and racist, but there is something I want to speak about, and that is Islamic communism, which has been thrown around a lot recently, especially this week in relation to Zoran. But I've also seen it before in relation to Hassan, obviously Hassan Piker, who I think is probably an atheist, but is from Turkey. I don't know everything about him, but I'm guessing he was raised Muslim. There's a few others in Congress as well who are more progressive, but are Muslim. So you're seeing this thrown around a lot about Islamic communists. And there's actually been a concerted effort recently to connect Western leftists to militant groups that are Islamic or Islamicist and often terror groups as well. And I made that video this week about Palestine Action, where the UK government are seeking to classify them as a terrorist group, the same as like an Al Qaeda or a Boko Haram, which is on the terror list for the UK. That also includes Hamas's political wing and militant wing, and Hezbollah's political wing and militant wing. But also should be noted that Hezbollah and Hamas's political wings have only recently been put on that list in the last 6 years. But what they're trying to do is link Western anti-imperialism, which often, of course, includes the support for Palestinians, with actual terrorism and Islamicism, and make it seem like this one big boogeyman. And that's how you get something like Islamic communism. Now, there is Islamic communism. There are various different groups throughout the last 100 years which have been explicitly Muslim and communist, mainly in the Middle East, and there's been massive divisions and splits. Although a lot of Muslim communists don't like Ba'athists, that's how I guess a lot of people see it, like the Ba'ath Party and pan-Arab movements with like a revolutionary fervour in the Middle East and between the 1930s and 50s is how we would maybe see Islamic communism. But no, there were actually explicitly Islamic and communist groups within the Middle East. And Muslim communists seized power in Afghanistan. That's why the Soviets got involved in Afghanistan in the way they did, because they're trying to back up the new communist government, again, filled with secular Muslims. I've actually known myself Muslim communists from Afghanistan, but I went to university with. So it isn't a new thing, but it's fair to say most people are not talking about secular Muslim communists. They're trying to combine Islamicism and communism together to make a new boogeyman. And anyone who knows anything about either of those ideologies can tell you the only thing they might share in common is the rejection of capitalism and Western-dominated capitalism and support for Palestine. That's the main overlap. But of course, if you are a conservative Islamist, you don't want to replace capitalism with communism. You want to replace capitalism with Sharia law. And your support for Palestine might not be consistent with an anti-imperialist worldview that is global. It might just be solely related to this issue or issues around your own religion. So even that we share a common cause on that front doesn't mean we share a common ideology, because, for example, while an Islamist would support armed struggle in Palestine against the Israelis, they might not support armed struggle by various other communist groups around the world, because their ideology isn't based in armed struggle for all peoples. It's about in only groups they care about. We're specifically talking about Islamicism there and not Muslims. And you can be a Muslim communist, and Mamdani clearly is a Muslim and a socialist. But that just pretty much means that he is a socialist who has these religious beliefs that seem to not really actually inform his political views, which is very common in politics generally, especially in left-wing politics. But I want to talk about all this hysteria again and mainly link it back to how this is the new Judeo-Bolshevism and how it's being used to create a Red Scare panic and hysteria, but also used as propaganda to help fascism rise. And what the UK government is doing to Palestine Action is a key example of this. But actually, I thought we would actually start, because I was going to say this for the end, but given what I'm saying, I want to make it a bit clearer. So, Ayaan Hirsi Ali is an ex-Muslim who became famous for being an atheist. And after Israel started its war on Gaza, she came out and said she's actually converted to Christianity. But she wasn't converted to Christianity because she believed in God suddenly. It was more as an anti-Islamist, anti-leftist thing that she thought we needed an ideology to oppose them. And I thought it was interesting because it's the first time I heard someone articulate this in a way I wouldn't call it reasonable or rational, but less hysterically than like American conservatives. So she writes, "Why do I call myself a Christian now? Part of the answer is global. Western civilization is under threat from three different but related forces. The resurgence of great power authoritarianism and the expansionism in the forms of the Chinese Communist Party and Putin's Russia, the rise of global Islamicism, which threatens to mobilize a vast population against the West, and the viral spread of woke ideology, which is eating into the moral fiber of the next generation. We can't fight off these forces until we answer the question, what is it that unites us? The only credible answer, I believe, lies in our desire to uphold the legacy of the Judeo-Christian tradition. That legacy consists of an elaborate set of ideas and institutions designed to safeguard human life, freedom, and dignity." So I read that briefly because I want to compare this to Judeo-Bolshevism throughout the video. So when people like Goebbels used to do speeches about Judeo-Bolshevism, he would frame it in opposition to Western civilization. And he would actually use the term Western civilization. Kind of imagine this to be like a post-World War II thing, but it's actually pre-World War II when Goebbels and other fascists were talking about this. For those of you who are unaware, you might have heard of cultural Marxism, which I think is pretty much the same, but it's a modern spin-off of it. Judeo-Bolshevism was, I won't go into the massive history of it, but it was the belief that communism was a Jewish ideology which was a front for the Jewish takeover of the world. And that basically meant that communists were either Jews or they were sympathetic and agents of the Jewish conspiracy to take over the world and destroy the West, right? This was based on like the popularity of the forgery of the Elders of Zion, and that was at the start of the 20th century, and then became a hysterical panic after the Bolsheviks overthrew the Tsar, because there were a few prominent members of the Bolsheviks who were Jewish, and there was support for the Bolsheviks among Russian Jewish communities because of their oppression under the Tsar, and also because they were often more secular as well. Karl Marx also had Jewish heritage too. So all of this played into the fascist hysteria around the overthrow of the, obviously, Tsarist monarchy. And to a lot of anti-Semites, it was, oh, the Jews are coming to take over the world now. They did it in Russia, and now they are threatening Western civilization as they control the USSR, right? So anti-Semitism and anti-communism essentially became the same thing for most people. If you were an anti-communist, it's very, very likely you were an anti-Semite. The same way today, I believe, most anti-communist ideology is completely wrapped up in racism and fascism. It was, of course, the same back then, but more strongly linked to actual anti-Semitism. And to then, there wasn't really a difference. If you were against Jews, you were against communists. If you were against communists, you were against Jews. Didn't really matter. It became one thing. And it wasn't just popular in Germany. It was popular throughout the West, very popular in the United States. One very underrated part of the Red Scare in regards to Joseph McCarthy and the war on Hollywood in the 40s and early 50s is that a lot of the targets of Joseph McCarthy were Jewish people in Hollywood. And obviously a lot of them weren't even socialists at all. They were just Jews he didn't like. And they might have been progressive Jews or Jews who supported the Democratic Party. There were, of course, communists. There were Jewish communists in there as well. But this purge on Hollywood was firmly motivated by anti-Semitism. Joseph McCarthy was a massive anti-Semite. So were so many Americans. That is never taught to you in school because they don't want to actually show you that a lot of anti-Semitism is completely wrapped up in anti-leftism. It becomes indistinguishable from each other. All of this anti-Semitism throughout this period was so tied up with anti-leftism and anti-communism, right? So I'll give you all that groundwork to say that we're entering a new period where we don't think that anymore. There isn't many people talking about Jewish communism. I think the cultural Marxism conspiracy is inherently anti-Semitic. I think Jordan Peterson is an anti-Semite, and I think he uses it in an anti-Semitic way. But it's fair to say it's not as explicit. But what is explicit is the linking between Islam, what they perceive to be Islam, and socialism, creating this new boogeyman of leftists and Islamists, or as we're now seeing with Mamdani and the smears against him, Islamic communism, which is a completely incoherent ideology they're given to him, where he is both advocating for communism and advocating for Sharia law at the exact same time, according to conservatives. So I just want to give you both the Republican and the Democrat reaction, where they're going full racist against Mamdani for being a Muslim socialist. So the guy I showed you at the start, Zohran Little Mohammed Mamdani, is anti-Semitic, socialist, communist. He will destroy the great city of New York. He needs to be deported. That's why I'm calling for him to be subject to denaturalization proceedings. NYC in 2001, we will never forget. NYC in 2025 elects Muslim jihadist. 24 years ago, 9/11, now a Muslim socialist is on pace to run New York City. So I'll just stop on that Charlie Kirk post, right? Do Islamists traditionally like communists? Is there like a massive link between Islamicism that leads to terror attacks and Muslim socialists? Like, in the context of Afghanistan again, what was that war between? Muslim communists and Muslim jihadists. Many Americans, you know this part of history at least, what side did you back? You didn't back the Muslim communists who were giving women equal rights. You backed the jihadists. The irony of using 9/11, 9/11 happened because the US backed the jihadists and they didn't back the Muslim socialists. So the lesson should be, yeah, now we have the chance to back the Muslim socialists and we should do it this time. Like, not back the jihadists, because that will actually backfire on New York. So just more filth about electing a Muslim communist. One of Tim Pool's co-hosts, I don't know who the fuck this guy is, Trump should invoke the Communist Control Act to block Mamdani from becoming mayor of New York. We have to play hardball. Don't worry, it's not just the hysteria from the right who just hate Muslims. The Democrats also hate him because they're so pro-Israeli. They think because he's Muslim, he just hates Jewish people. And they've actually been saying that about him, like, to millions of people. So here's someone who is a congressman for New York, and he wrote here a statement about Mamdani's campaign. He met with him to discuss the issues. They share a desire, he says, to lift up vulnerable New Yorkers. To that end, I explain why Jewish New Yorkers feel unsafe in the city, and that as he continues this campaign, he must not only condemn anti-Jewish hate and calls for violence, but make clear that as mayor, he would take proactive steps to protect all New Yorkers and make us secure. Democratic Congressman Laura Gillen says his comments about Intifada, calls for violence against Jewish people, it's really inappropriate for someone wanting to be the mayor of New York. Eric Swalwell says, I don't associate myself with what he has said about Jewish people. What has he said about Jewish people? Is it just because he's a Muslim? He must hate Jews, apparently. And then this is probably what you guys have seen. New York Senator says she misspoke when she claimed Zohran Mamdani condoned global jihad. So this is what she said when she was talking to someone on the radio who was complaining that Mamdani, in his time in the state Senate, had actually endorsed a bill to strip non-profit status, I think, from Jewish organizations that funded illegal Israeli settlements. So, pretty cool thing to do. The cooler is exactly the New York constituents that I've spoken to that are alarmed. They are alarmed by past public statements. They are alarmed by past positions, particularly references to global jihad. So, insanely racist to say that this guy has called for a jihad, but also sentiment against him is because he isn't pro-Israeli, right? And that's why they're going so mask-off racist and they feel so comfortable. And again, I refer back to my videos about woke fascism. How are they framing their fascist views against anyone who's a Muslim? Oh, well, you're a threat. You're a threat to us and you're a threat to Jewish people because they feel like you're an anti-Semite. You're racist against Jewish people and we can't allow that in New York. You're a racist because you don't support the worst crimes against humanity done by a state claiming to represent Jewish people. What we're seeing in Western society is woke fascism spreading everywhere based on the notion that all Muslims are savage barbarians has been turbocharged by what Israel have done to Palestine, where all of these politicians in every single Western country feel so comfortable being insanely racist to anyone they view as a Muslim. In 2015, this was relegated to the fringes. The far right were the only group saying this. Now everyone is fucking talking like this, and there is no pushback. And part of the reason is there's so many people who are so brainwashed to hate Muslims fundamentally. And let's talk about that a little bit as well. When I say Muslim, you have a certain image in your head and you have a certain view on what a Muslim believes. There is no nuance in our discussion of Muslim. Like, what is Islamicism compared to like just general Islam? Like, what countries are where the most Muslims even come from? It's not even, they're not even Arabs, but we all think all Muslims are Arabs, right? And we all think they're backwards, violent, they hate all LGBT people, They're just people that clash with Western civilization. And people often say to me, you can't be racist to a Muslim. Yeah, you can't be racist for not liking a religion. You can totally be racist to Muslims. And you can be totally racist to people you perceive to be Muslims, because so many people who are either born in Muslim countries or even born in countries that are predominantly Muslim, but they aren't even Muslim, they're subjected to racist Muslim abuse. And I don't like religion. I don't like Islam. I have been joking a bit about recently about converting just because of some spicy anti-alcohol and anti-weed takes I posted on Twitter. But I generally don't like religion. And I don't like Christianity either. But what I see with the Abrahamic religion, and you can see that right now with Judaism, you can see this right now with Christianity in America and Judaism in America, and obviously you can see it with Islam in certain countries as well, is, in my opinion, Abrahamic religion looks similar when it's interpreted in a way, in a conservative way, no matter where you find it. Like, is there really much difference between Boko Haram and Joseph Kony's army? There's literally like no difference. We see what Israel are doing right now, which is far worse than any other militant group, but you could see it in the same vein as a group like the Islamic State. They're doing the same things for the same types of reasons. There is no nuance. So even with Islamic State, so many Muslims fought and died fighting them, including loads of people from the Iranian army as well. But we're meant to be brainwashed to think they're all the same and they all love each other and they're all best pals and they all believe in the same fucking shit. So someone even like Mamdani, a random Muslim in Thailand, the Ayatollah and Sadiq Khan are all on the same page about Islam and shit. It is just like, people are just so brainwashed to hate a certain group of people. And that's why I'm saying Islamic communism reminds me of Judeo-Bolshevism. I mean, in that it's just so obviously being used to whip people up into a frenzy and combines two things that on their own have been used for fascism. Like you have anti-Semitism and anti-communism being blended together. And then you have anti-Islam, anti-communism being blended together now to make it even more palatable to the racist establishment, but also just the racist societies we live in. So with the woke fascism argument, you can start justifying your fascism. Well, these people don't like gay people. We must protect the gay people. We must protect women. We must protect Jews because Muslims are also backwards. And you must understand we cannot let them into our society. You must understand Israel must do this because if they didn't, then they'd be destroyed by the Muslims. And you can see how they're weaving these together and they're trying to do it to completely suppress support for Palestine. Because in Muslim majority countries, support for Palestine is overwhelmingly popular. But in non-Muslim countries, support for Palestine is primarily led by leftists. And while there are a significant amount of Western leftists who are Muslims, a lot of them aren't Muslims. So you have to tie them all together as this same scary threat. So you make a group like Palestine Action on the same level as all these other terror groups. So you can demonize them all together as this shared threat. Their argument never makes any sense because they say that all Muslims hate the LGBT community, but then you have like someone like Mamdani who's a Muslim and he's a socialist who has a great record on LGBT rights, right? So this isn't meant to make sense though. It's not meant to make sense. And they don't give a shit it makes sense. And I think most of them know it doesn't make sense. They know portraying someone as a conservative Muslim and also a socialist inherently is hypocritical, but it works as fear-mongering. It works as a slur against someone. It works to whip up hatred against everyone. That there are two groups working in tandem right now to destroy your life, and it's socialists and it's Muslims. And if there's a Muslim socialist, evidence that these two groups are joining together to destroy the United States and to destroy Western society. And you see these attacks on people like Hassan, Mamdani, but this is going to get even worse because I was thinking about this recently with climate change heating up the planet so much. A lot of these places are actually in the Middle East, and they're in these countries with Muslim majority populations. So they're going to go northwards, a lot of them. We're going to see this rhetoric ramp up even more because the people protesting for these groups' rights and to help them will be leftists. And they'll use the same argument they've been using since 2015, since the refugee crisis coming out of the civil wars in Syria and Libya and the Arab Spring. They'll say leftists and Muslims are together working to destroy all the progress we have made in the tolerant West, and we can't let them take us backward. So we're just going to classify these groups terror groups, like Palestine Action, and we're going to throw you in a cell for 14 years for supporting humanity. Well, we'll give Israel unlimited bombs, and they're going to copy the tactics of Israel as well when it comes to refugee crises in the coming decades. What we're seeing with the desensitization to this brutality that Israel are doing is the normalization of this violence so the West can do it. And we have seen this already in places like Spain, for example, and Greece and Italy. And this is going to get even worse. So expect this fear-mongering about Islamic communism to get even crazier. And I do firmly believe it's a new spin on things like Judeo-Bolshevism, where it's taking people's prejudice against two different groups, combining them to make them out to be this horrible boogeyman, and to make people support terrible crimes and give away their freedoms so they can stop this like boogeyman. In America, you had the Cold War where it was the communists, you had the War on Terror where it was the Muslims, and now they're just combining both of them and saying, fuck it, we'll get both of them this time. And that's what's happening. That is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think, and thank you for watching.